Today we will be winning the Red Turban Rebellion as Yuan. We'll of course be playing in Iron Man mode with achievements enabled, because what use is a guide if you have to reload your saves, right? So before we get started, let's talk about the Red Turban Rebellion. To start with, we have this modifier, which gives some pretty nasty negatives, as you can see. This modifier will stay with us until 1368. But the Red Turban Rebellion will give it its own modifier, which will add even worse buffs, which will stack on top of these existing ones. The really awful one here, you can see, is levy size minus 50. To start with, we basically have no army. Despite being the largest country in the world and the most profitable one with the most money, we have a paltry 1,000 men as our standing army, and we can raise around 2,000 to 3,000 levies. Yuan is the definition of a paper tiger here at the beginning. There are some things we can do to correct that. First of all, we can hand out the privilege to the nobility, which will increase levy size by 10%, and we can hand out a privilege to the commoners, which will increase the peasants' levy size by 20%. Doing both those things won't be enough to completely combat the negative modifier, but it will give us at least some levies. We could also hand out this tribal modifier, which gives us 30% extra tribal levies, but that's not as useful. Why? Because most tribals are located in Manchuria, which we will lose control of as part of the Red Turban Rebellion. We do have other tribals in the south of the country, which makes the privilege a little useful, but do be aware that we will lose Manchuria. Manchuria starts off uncored, so I would recommend not wasting your cabinet seats coring any of this land, because we're just going to lose it. Just don't care about it. Don't worry about it. If you're curious where exactly the line is drawn, it's here between Manchuria, Mongolia, and northern China. An easy way to tell is all of this land that you're going to lose starts off uncored. So let's hand out the 3 privileges that increase our levy sizes to start with. For our reform that we have access to, I would recommend not actually using it. We want to save this reform for when the Age of Tradition ends and we go to the next stage, that being the Renaissance, so we can grab a better privilege than the ones we have access to here, or better reform than the ones we have access to here. Before we talk about anything else, I want to talk about our religion. We start off with this Tibetan Buddhism religion, which honestly isn't that good and is only practiced by a minority of our country. I actually recommend switching to this religion, San Jiao, which I'm almost definitely pronouncing wrong. This religion is practiced by a majority of people in our country, which of course makes it a lot better for keeping the population in check. It also gives this really nice plus 0.5 legitimacy a month, together with max literally plus 10 and access to harmony and righteousness mechanics. It will cost us 50 stability, but we're going to lose a lot of stability anyway, so we might as well roll with it. We now have access to righteousness. This will tick up to 100 on its own, and when it does, it will give some nice estate of satisfaction equilibrium, as well as a little monthly control and prestige. Harmony you kind of want to keep at 0, because it provides 0.2 monthly prosperity and a monthly development of 0.001. If you go above 10, you instead lose the prosperity and development and instead gain a slight bonus to your estate satisfaction equilibrium, same as if you go below. I don't recommend joining sect or anything, because you'll automatically join some in the few days after the game begins. When we look at our economy, you'll see that we're very heavily in the negative. We start with a lot of money, but the costs of our treasury are immense, and the money is essentially going to flow out really fast. In order to end the Red Turban Rebellion, we need to achieve legitimacy up to 90 and our stability up to 30, as well as our heavenly mandate, which we can see here, our celestial authority, up to 50. When the Red Turban Rebellion starts, we'll lose 20 legitimacy, 20 stability, and 25 celestial authority. So our goals are kind of to get our celestial authority up to 100, get our legitimacy as high to 100 as possible, and get our stability up to around 50. Unfortunately, there are a lot of events that we can't avoid during the rebellion that are going to drop our stability even further. So it's not something we can really just get to where we want it to be and just keep it there. There's also the fact that the Red Turban Rebellion has to last 20 years before we can end it. But of course, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So when it comes to balancing the economy, I really think you should prioritize just not losing all of your massive amounts of wealth. Since we start with so much money, we really want to try and invest that to make more money, not lose it just paying for massive amounts of stuff. So don't be afraid to just drop down the costs of a lot of these things. We do want to have at least some income on legitimacy, stability, and celestial authority, but we can afford to drop these numbers down, at least for a little while. When it comes to what to do with your money, I would recommend investing pretty much all of it in your capital area and the provinces around. You should keep in mind that a lot of the land south of your capital is going to defect to various nations, especially land in this central area. Pretty much all of this central area is going to be occupied by other nations that spawned from you. And even if they didn't, a lot of this land is so far away, it's hard for you to actually get much money from it. As you can see, control is pretty low around the whole country. So centralizing your wealth in your starting area is the safe bet to actually make something resembling an income, but it's unlikely you're going to be able to make a massive amount, the amount of money you need to pay off all of the expenses of being Yuan. One thing we are going to do is we're going to demolish a couple of buildings. Since most of this land is going to be occupied by the rebellions, we don't actually want there to be any forts and castles in it. So we're going to go around and demolish a lot of the castles in the southern parts of China. If you're wondering where you should keep your forts, I would definitely recommend keeping the one in your capital, obviously, as well as some of these more northerly ones. The forts here in Shandong and Hebei should be safe from being taken over by rebels, so it should be fine to keep them around. Hopefully I'm remembering correctly. When it comes to research, I wouldn't do anything just too crazy, just go down normally, probably to max RGOs plus 10, and then we'll think about where we're going to be in the next stage. For our cabinet ministers, there's not much they can really do that will help things. It's worth increasing control in one of the locations which has a lot of wealth centralized in it, which isn't your capital. For example, down here. But I wouldn't recommend expanding these locations because these locations are going to defect. And even if they weren't, you can't make much money in these locations because of low control anyway, and increasing it by an extra 10 isn't really going to be enough to give you a big income from these territories. As you can see, our levies have immediately massively increased from the privileges we've had out. We can now get 102k levies. If only we could summon these during the Red Turban Rebellion, it would be easy. You'll also notice that vassals are very rebellious. I honestly wouldn't worry too much. They're never really going to rebel. You can start improving relationships with them, mainly because you don't have much else to do with your diplomats. But you shouldn't really worry about them revolting wholesale, because they won't unless their loyalty gets down into the red. They can't even attempt to revolt. But we do want to get our subject loyalty up, because if we can get it high enough, these guys will help us during the Red Turban Rebellion. And we definitely want a nation like Korea to come in and just destroy all of our enemies for us, right? With setup done, we're now going to unpause. If you want to prepare for an eventual future, there are 3 gold mine locations not too far from the capital, which I think are worth investing in. Keep in mind, of course, that proximity is basically 0 in these locations to start with. So you'll need to build roads and expand and increase your proximity score, which is going to take quite a while before you can really start making most use of these locations, but it may be worth investing in them early. Here is the first of many events related to the Red Turban Rebellion. These events normally give you a choice between worsening the modifier for the Red Turban Rebellion or making it better. I would always recommend making it better, because this modifier improvement applies not just to the Red Turban Rebellion modifier that will eventually trigger, which you can now see here, which gives minus 45 levies, which combines with the minus 50 from factional strife, which puts us at only 5% levies across our nation. So because this decreasing the effects of this modifier affects both, it can help alleviate the damage, if only a little. So I would always recommend picking the option that decreases it, even if it might not seem as good as the other option. You may get these events where pirates raid your country. I recommend actually just declaring war on them when they do this with the anti-piracy CB. You probably won't even need to do anything. Korea, as long as they're loyal, might just win the war for you. So it's a good opportunity to just sit back and let the whole thing solve itself, as they've done here. The main benefit from doing this is just to stop the pirate raid events. You can also snap up a little money, not that it means much, as well as some prestige from defeating them. And since it essentially costs you nothing, it's definitely nice. If you're feeling confident and you've managed to get your crown authority to a acceptable place, you really want to get it as high as possible to decrease the cost of court, which is going to be quite expensive. But if you've reached a point where, like me here, I'm getting positive legitimacy even without spending a penny on the court, in this sort of situation, it may be worth considering giving out some extra privileges. For example, Elite Council here, because it gives a slight buff to stability gain by reducing the decay, as well as Religious Administration here, which gives a slight 0.1 buff to stability. Which honestly isn't much, but every little helps. Now that the Renaissance is triggered, I recommend picking a reform. Really, it's a choice. Royal Decree is pretty good. It pushes you towards centralization, gives state satisfaction decay, and gives you crown power. But it doesn't really give us more soldiers, which is why I personally prefer local army organization, which gives us an extra 20% peasant levies. And when it comes to soldiers, every little helps, really. When it comes to advancements, I'd recommend going down for loyalty of subjects and cultural overlordship, and then all the way to the local proximity cost that you get from selecting admin. Increasing our proximity even slightly will do a lot for our economy, as well as these extra buffs to our subjects will be very useful when the Red Turban Rebellion actually starts. The Black Death has spawned. This can be quite a bit random depending on how close it spawns to China. It might just never reach us. But I've had runs where the plague spawned very close to the border with China and just spread over. I've had games where it spread very far west, like it looks like it has in this run. And in these types of runs, it doesn't seem to get over to China. I guess we'll just wait and see. Black Death has successfully entered our country, but there's a good chance it just dies out rather quickly. Yes, as you can see, the Black Plague has now died out, but it may just come back again and again a few times. You can kind of try and game it if you want to. There, it's back again by trying to sponsor forgiveness. I would not recommend doing this because if you sponsor forgiveness, you decrease the strength of provinces' resistance to the plague, which means the plague can get in better. Better to keep the plague out, I'd say. So this is the event. This rather unassuming event is the one that will start the Red Turban Rebellion. I honestly recommend simply arresting this person and starting the Red Turban Rebellion now instead of waiting, because avoiding the Red Turban Rebellion is honestly almost impossible. You need to get your stability up to around 95, and then have your legitimacy at 50, and have two of your estates, one of those being the commoners, at 75 happiness, and you essentially need to do that forever. There's no timer for the Red Turban Rebellion to turn off and no longer be able to trigger. So I recommend arresting this guy and making it hard and letting it trigger. Also, arresting him should stop one of the rebel countries, that being Song, from forming. So we're going to arrest him. One thing you could do is you could raise your levies now. As you can see, we have 300,000 levies from the laws we've passed, together with the privileges we've handed out and the fact that we've managed to reduce factional strife. But that's kind of gamey, so we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to fight the civil war as it is. If you want to do that, be my guest. It will let you win the Yellow Turban Rebellion very easily, because you'll have just so many levies that you'll just destroy all of the rebelling countries, and then you can sit comfortably and wait for your stability to replenish until the rebellion ends. But we're not going to do that. We're going to let the rebellion trigger, and we're going to try and fight it organically. Here we go, the Red Turban Rebellion has started. Just a minor uprising, they'll know their place soon enough. So, if we check, we can now see that we have the factional strife modifier, as well as this new Red Turban Rebellion modifier. We've managed to reduce the impact of this quite a bit, so we're still able to raise around 100,000 levies. If we raise them right now, that would be a good way to deal with the rebellion, but of course we're not going to do that. Keep in mind that in order to end the rebellion, we must wait 20 years, just as it is. We must get our celestial authority to 50, which we've done. We must get our stability to 30 and our legitimacy to 90. That's not too difficult. Since our celestial authority is already at where we need to be, I'm actually going to drop the amount of money we're spending on it to just keep it as it is. Getting our stability up to the required number is going to be what's difficult, because as the nations break off and rebel, they'll tank our stability. You'll see. Here's our first rebellion. This one will appear up here by the Great Wall. One of the things you could do is actually demolish these parts of the Great Wall to avoid them coming under the control of the rebels. But personally, I really don't like the idea of demolishing the Great Wall of China. So I prefer letting them keep those locations and having to siege them down. As we can see, it will cost us 12 stability, this guy rebelling. There he goes. We will now raise our levies, or 100,000 of them. We will, of course, gather them in our capital. Really, we don't even need to necessarily fight these guys. Our vassals should do it on their own without much involvement with us. Instead, what we should do is prepare for the other rebellions that are going to happen. I recommend not having your army run around in a 100k stack, but dividing it up into maybe 20,000 or so stacks to avoid attrition. When thinking what to do with these rebellion nations, it may be tempting to rein them in. The way reining in works is it makes them become loyalists towards Yuan, which means you can call them into wars against the other rebels. But personally, in my experience, people tend to switch sides. You'll make them loyalists and they'll switch to being neutral and maybe even switch to being rebels again. Personally, I would prefer just full annexing them. Even if we vassalize them, they'll still switch sides and probably become a problem later. I'm going to vassalize these guys now just because they're small and very pathetic, just to show you that later on they will switch sides again. So as I said, I would just recommend full annexing these guys. Don't vassalize them, don't rein them in, just get them out of here. You still have calls in their land, so it's better to just bring them in. Here's our next rebellion in the center of the country. Since we've demolished all the forts, it should be very easy to deal with these rebels now. We'll simply go in, full occupy them, and then the war will be over. It may become a little hairy if they start to cascade rebel, but it should honestly be fine. We have our vassals who will help us by swarming in. We have our large armies. It would be dangerous if we didn't have many levies, but we have a lot of levies because we've got the privileges that make them happen, and because we've kept factional strife down together with the actual Red Turban Rebellion modifier itself. Here comes the next rebellion. They're going to start coming faster and faster now until they've all spawned. Here's one of the events where we lose control. This is our lose control of Tibet event. This will mean all of the vassals we have in Tibet will just become independent. There's no way to avoid this. It's just going to happen, so you just have to accept it. And here's the event for Manchuria to break away. All that blue, beautiful Manchurian land, and it's gone. As I said, no use worrying about it. Once Ming spawns, you know you're at the end of the conflict. Ming is essentially the last rebellion, though they are the strongest. They come with a load of buffs as well as hundreds of thousands of gold. Actually, I think it's 10,000 gold, exactly 10,000. Yeah, I believe so. And a bunch of army tradition, so it's going to be a little bit of a more grueling conflict than the other rebel nations. But even so, Ming is rather small, and without any forts, because we've demolished all of them, it shouldn't be too hard for us to defeat them, simply because their army can't be everywhere, and there's more of us than there are of them. Once all the rebel nations have spawned, you'll start to get these events about allied nations spawning. Personally, I would choose the second option, just say no. We don't need them, at least we shouldn't need them, unless you're really struggling against Ming or someone else, and you need that extra buff that they would give you from spawning with and then raising levies. So I would say no, just to help increase your stability. The faster your stability reaches max, the faster the war ends, after all. And there we go. With Ming defeated, the Red Turban Rebellion is essentially over. The only thing left to do is wait for the stability to increase to the point where we can officially call the conflict over. And of course, we need to wait an extra 15 years for the game to accept that the Red Turban Rebellion is over. There's also these guys here, who we can't really deal with because they're a one province minor, and they're not actually in China anymore, despite still being in the Red Turban Rebellion. So we'll need to attack them and, I guess, annex them so they don't cause trouble. Because they don't count as being in China, we weren't able to take them with the Red Turban Rebellion casus belli, so we'll probably just take them normally. We do have a claim on their land, or a core on their land even, so any old war should be enough to destroy them. And there we go. We only had to wait 15 or so years for the game to consider the rebellion to be over after all the rebels died, but it is now over. We've lost the Red Turban Rebellion modifier, which massively decreased our levies. We now have 600k levies we could raise right now if we wanted to. There's not really anything to stop us literally just conquering the world, and we are still the game's undisputed #1 great power. Either way, that's the Red Turban Rebellion defeated pretty handily, I might say. I think I made it look a little too easy. I definitely think it should be able to end much earlier, though. You shouldn't have to wait 20 years after every rebel has been defeated for the rebellion to actually end, especially since there's no events that spawn more rebels or anything. Really, the rebellion should look to see that the last rebel has spawned spawned as a check as opposed to 20 years in the future. But either way, thank you for watching. I hope this video was insightful and maybe helpful for you if you wanted to play the Great Yuan. But this is the end of the video, and so I'll see you next time.